What's going on, guys? I'm Jody. This is Inspire Woodcraft. I am finally replacing the blade on my 12-inch miter saw. This is the factory blade that came with this thing, and the power's unplugged before anybody loses their minds here. This is the stock blade that came with this saw. It's a 60-tooth thin curved blade. I've been rocking this thing for 5 years. I'm almost embarrassed to say that, but I've made it work all this time, and finally I'm at a point where I need to replace it. I'm replacing it with this CMT full curve 72 tooth blade. I got the 72 tooth because I use my saw for everything. I use it from cutting construction grade materials all the way to cutting fine stock and trimming stuff down, breaking down materials into easier to manage sections, the whole nine. So this is really kind of a workhorse in the shop. I didn't want an ultra fine cut tooth like I can't remember what's up from 72, like a 96 tooth or something like that. I didn't want that because that's too fine. I also didn't want to stick with the 60 tooth because it's a little bit too rough, in case that information helps anybody. I also went with a full curve this time to eliminate some of the blade deflection and also get a lot more sort of oomph coming into the cut, which some people will say wears out the motor more. I have no doubt that this saw is powerful enough to spin that blade and power through this material whatsoever. So that's what I'm upgrading it to. In doing all this and taking all this stuff apart and tuning all this stuff up, I kind of got to the zero clearance insert. And it reminded me that I saw a video a while back that said a zero clearance insert on a miter saw is pointless. And in fact, in their sort of haphazard example, they showed that having the zero clearance insert on the miter saw actually made tear out worse. There was some issues with the way that they put the example together. But my point today is to sort of demystify that, because I've been running a zero clearance insert on here for a long time, and I do have my reasons, and tear out is a thing with this. The problem I have with that video is they said miter saw, but then they used a slider. Now, for those of you that don't know the difference between a fixed miter saw and a sliding miter saw, as a fixed saw, this saw will only do one thing. It'll go up and down. It can change directions, yes, and it can also change directions this way, yes, but the entire motor and head assembly stays in one spot. It can pivot and rotate, but it can't move forward and backwards. With a slider, that's not the case. With a slider, you're going to be able to bring that blade out here and then drop it down and cut into it this way. And because of that, the way the teeth enter and exit the wood is different on a fixed miter than it is on a slider. And so there is some differences. And like I say, in that video, they used a slider, but then mentioned that that was the case on a miter saw. And left a lot of people confused from what I saw in the comments. So again, this is to sort of clarify. First of all, what is a zero clearance insert? A zero clearance insert is essentially an insert in the base of the saw where your factory one would normally be, that is, in theory, only the width, the opening is the width that the saw blade is thick, if that makes any sense. So essentially what you would do is you would make your insert without the saw kerf cut into it. You'd screw it all down, you'd get it all exactly where you want, you'd turn the saw on, you'd make one single cut. And by doing that, you're creating the kerf. That leaves you with no additional opening on either side of the blade. That is helpful for supporting wood fibers to prevent tear out. That is also extremely helpful for not letting thin pieces get wedged down in there. If you get enough thin pieces wedged down into your wider opening insert, if the conditions are right, you can actually cause kickback on a miter saw. A lot of people don't realize that you can get a kickback situation on a miter saw, but you can. So it's nice to have a zero clearance insert to keep those small pieces out of there. And if you're cutting thin pieces and you want to keep the thin piece that you cut, it also prevents that from sliding down in there and then getting cut up or burnt or scarred with the blade itself. For me on my saw, I have a zero clearance insert. I made this out of some old hardwood flooring that I got from a friend of mine. Have that in there nice and tight. And then what I think is commonly overlooked, but equally if not more important, is having a zero clearance fence. So I have this fence here, and now when I bring my saw blade down, I have zero clearance the whole way through. I have plenty of support from my material here and my material here, and it pretty much eliminates most, if not all, tear out depending on the material that I'm cutting. The reason I'm really bringing this up as well is because most of us buy a tool and we rock the factory blade for as long as we can. I know for me personally, when I got this saw 5 years ago, I just couldn't afford to buy a premium blade to go with it. And once you go down the rabbit hole of blades, you start buying a blade for construction type stuff, then you go, well, now I need a blade for really fine stuff, and nobody switches their blades out. That's just not a thing. So for me, I just made this work. Couldn't afford the upgrade anyways, made this work. These two things helped me out a lot over time with the inconsistencies or the faults of this crummy 60-tooth blade that came with the saw. Now I'm going to show you guys how this blade enters and exits the cuts, both on a thinner piece, or a smaller piece I should say, like this 2x2, and also this piece here, which is about 7 1/4 or so wide. And the reason I want to show you guys that is very important to see how those teeth are actually engaging with the material to understand why things are happening that are happening. And I'm hoping that this will help some of you that are scratching your head wondering why you're getting tear out or certain cuts or certain situations happening. So I have everything tied back here so I can show you guys a little bit better. As we go, you can see where how this blade is going to enter and exit the wood. As I come down on top of it, it's going to just clip this top part. But the tooth itself is going to enter the wood here and come out up here, at least on this top part. As we go down, and remember, the tooth going in is going to be a clean cut. As we come down though, still a clean cut here, we're gonna have a ton of blowout back here because those teeth are blowing out that back side and there's nothing back here to support our material. When we come down here to the end, most likely that's gonna be a fairly clean cut because the saw blade is actually coming up into the supporting material. In my experience, I have known this bottom edge to be a little rough, this top edge and this edge to be super clean, and then a bunch of blowout on the back. But there's some tear out, just not much on the bottom. And it's funny because in that video, they said, any carpenter will tell you that when you're cutting a piece of wood where you want the face to be nice, you put the face down. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, that doesn't make sense because my saw doesn't work that way. Well, again, they're using a slider. And a slider, the teeth are actually able to start from the bottom and cut up into the piece, which would give you your blowout on top. If we take this piece here, we're gonna see things are a little bit different now because, again, this stays in one position as it comes down. Here I have a spinning blade coming down into it. As we start the beginning, okay, it's gonna sort of cut and sever these pieces here. Should be okay. We're not going to break the bottom surface of this material till we're way down here. At that case, we're going to start peeking out the bottom side here. These teeth, as they cut down, are gonna blow out right here. These are gonna start to pull up. There's not gonna be much tear out here, but I bet you there's gonna be tear out here. Same thing as we come through. Clean entrance on this. On the entrance here, we're gonna be clean. On the exit here, we're gonna have blowout. And it's gonna stay that way up to the apex of the blade. Bad here, good there. So what I wanna do is I'm actually gonna take a pen here. I think this is gonna stay clean. This is gonna stay clean. We're gonna end up with tear out right here. So I'm just gonna kind of scribble on here. And I also think from about the center over, we're gonna end up with a bunch of tear out as well. On this one, if I was to put it in the saw like this, actually I've already marked this one. So we're gonna leave it just like this. Clean and clean or unmarked. When we tilt it back, I think this is gonna be completely blown out, this back side. And I think we're gonna be a little fuzzy on this bottom edge. I'm gonna plug this back in. I'm gonna unhook this so I don't cut my arm off. And then we're gonna give both of these a cut. No insert whatsoever. So we're gonna cut that and we're gonna take a look at the results. All right, so let's take a look at what we have here. Let's start with this piece. see if I can bring this up here to you guys so you can see it a little bit better. So this side seems pretty clean, and this side seems pretty clean. Okay, we had said that this was going to be a bunch of blowout. That's that back side. And as you can see, I have a whole bunch of splintered pieces off over here. That being the back side means that this was the bottom side. And I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see, but there is just a tiny bit of splintering down here on this. Hopefully that shows up. Now if we take a look at this one, see if I can get this to focus. We said that this top side would probably be clean. We might have a little fuzzy back here. I don't see too much. I do see a little bit towards this edge, but it's not anything not tolerable. Super clean side on this side. Back side, where are we at here? Back side, same thing, totally blown out just like the other one. But the real proof is right here. So you guys can see this. Here's our pen marks before, totally blown out on this edge here. Much cleaner on this side, except for this piece here, apparently. Now this piece is a piece of like project panel that you can get at like Home Depot or Lowe's. It's a bunch of little pieces of pine. So it's a very soft material. And I wanted to use this soft material because, for one, a lot of new people are using mostly softwoods and construction grade materials. So they're going to be the ones that have the most trouble. This is going to provide the most tear out, again, using a stock dull blade with construction grade type material. That's a lot of people. I know there's some of us that have ventured off into hardwoods and stuff, but a lot of people are still using this combination. So they're the ones that are going to get the most frustrated, and that's why I wanted to show it this way. So now what I'm going to do, for those that are interested, I'm actually going to put my zero clearance insert in here. I'm going to put a couple screws in here just to hold it in place. And then I'm going to put the zero clearance fence on there as well. And we're going to fasten that up. And then I'm going to make the exact same cuts. And we'll see what the difference is, if there's any. See if we can demystify the myth. All right. So first, I'm going to pick this back up exactly how I pulled it out of the saw. Okay, same thing. We have very crisp line here, very crisp line here, a little tiny bit of fuzzies here, and where's the other side? Oh, right here. Right here, you do have a little bit of fuzzies on this edge. I don't know if this is going to pick up on camera or not. It's way less than it was the first time. Now, keep in mind, this is a dull blade, a 5-year-old dull blade with a worn out zero clearance insert, because I've had this on here for quite some time and, well, it's just old and beat up. Okay, let's take a look at this piece. Here we have nice clean line all the way across. Here's the front of it. Where are we at? Nice and clean. Back side of it, where before there's a little bit of fuzzies. Okay, same thing, but not nearly what it was before. And then when we flip this over and look at the bottom, we have some fuzzies on the front edge, and again, none on the back edge. Okay, what I'm gonna do now, for those that are interested, I'm actually gonna take this back apart. I'm gonna change the blade out real quick, which I'm super stoked for because I've yet to put this blade on here. And I don't know, I just wanna see how much better it does. We're gonna do the same operation just to see. I'm not gonna go through the whole process. I'll make the cuts real quick and show you guys just so you have an idea of what it looks like when you put a new blade on there. Yeah, and then we'll go from there and we'll see what else we can do to make this thing run right. See, I told you guys. I'm actually really glad that that happened on camera. That's what I was talking about. When we cut that piece last time and the piece broke off, I should have known better. I shouldn't have put this back in the saw knowing that there was a weak spot in here somewhere. So what had happened is, I'm sure if I go back and look on camera, is that when that piece was severed, the small piece went underneath and caught up with that other piece. It grabbed that piece and it made the saw jump. That's exactly what I was talking about. So there's certain things, there's reasons why you would want that insert in there, your stock insert to begin with, but at least the factory insert. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a fair test, but I see that one camera is actually running out of battery, so we're going to take a look at this real quick. This is how the piece came out of the saw. And right here, super nice clean cut. Super nice clean cut. If we look on this back side, despite the hot rods, there is a little bit of fuzzies here. There we go. I don't know if that's showing up or not. Now when we look at the back side, I do still have a nice clean cut and then some tear out, just like we did before. But this is very minimal compared to how we were the first time. When we look at this piece, this is the back side, the side against the fence. So we have nice and clean, nice and clean, nice and clean on the bottom. On that other blade, we had a little bit of fuzzies on the bottom, and then you have very little bit of fuzzies back here, again, on that back side. What that tells me is that once I put this zero clearance fence back in, I set the whole thing back up. When we did this test the first time, we had the old blade. It's a 5-year-old stock blade. It was clean, but it was dull. Its time had been well used. The first test, we had no insert at all, and we got a really crummy cut. When we put the zero clearance in there, even though we're still using the crummy blade and a really wore out zero clearance, we noticed the cut was still way better. On this one, brand new blade, a little bit higher tooth count, but without the insert in there at all, we're still getting a better cut, which means once that insert's back in there and we're all dialed in, we're gonna have an even better cut. I don't know if I showed you guys this, but one thing real quick before I go. If you can't make a zero insert for your saw, maybe your saw just is goofy and you can't do that, maybe you don't have the tools to do it right. When I made mine, because of how the throat is on this one, I actually had to take the piece of hardwood flooring, and I had to take the router and route all this out just to be able to match the clearance on here so that I could get this to eventually set right and flush. If you don't have the capabilities, you're not able to do that, or whatever the case might be. A solution, and what I used to do before, is something similar to this. Now, keep in mind, this is a very rough example. I just took some rough stock, threw it together for you guys real quick. I'm gonna unplug this saw. This is what I used to do, is something like this. Essentially, all you need to have to make a zero clearance setup for your saw is a couple pieces of scrap plywood. Now, it's preferred those scrap pieces are flat and true to each other, because any minute shifts in angles and whatnot is going to give you a goofy reading. But so long as you have a couple pieces of flat piece of plywood, you can set one down as a base and one down against the fence. And if you make this piece a little wide, knowing that your cut is only going to come to here anyways, that piece that's uncut is going to help this all be one piece. If this was narrower and it was back here towards the cut, this would turn into two pieces. So that's going to mean that you can make this setup nice and square and how you want it, drill a hole in it here, hang it on the wall, and you'll always have this, or stash it somewhere. What I did as an example is most of us use these saws for 90-degree cuts. If you are someone who repeatedly uses, say, the 45-degree function of it, you could also scoot this down a little bit, and then, now I have the new blade on here, so this isn't gonna fit, but you could then create your own kerf in this as well. If I was going to do something like this, I would probably scoot this down a little bit farther. I'd also make the fence not so tall. A lot of us that are dealing with material that's no thicker than 1.5 inches or 2 inches, there's no reason why you need a fence that's that tall. There's no benefit to it whatsoever, except for maybe being able to reach it with a clamp. So your saw might be different than my saw. I'll leave that part up to you. But you only need the fence to provide support to the thickness of your material. So by having a shorter fence, you won't have these pieces wobbling around. And like I said, this is not this was just an idea. I wanted to throw it out there, give you guys a visual reference. But very quickly, you can create, say on a job site or something, a zero clearance setup for your saw. So in a pinch, this would work just fine. In fact, you could use just 2 pieces of plywood and not glue them together at all. If you only had a couple cuts to make, just throw them up here like this, put your piece in here, hold them up there tight, and just go. And that'll give you a nice zero clearance miter box, essentially. Anyways, hopefully you guys got something out of this. I know it's probably a long video, but there's a lot of stuff to be said in here. There's a lot of detail that needs to be known in order to know exactly why things are happening when they're happening. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching this video as always, and we'll see you guys in the next one.